Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good noon, depending on where you are. My name is Sophie Ziegler. I am the marketing coordinator for Library Juice Press and Library Juice Academy. And I'm so happy to be here. One of the many fun things that I get to do in this role is to organize these types of book launch events. And I'm very excited about today's launch for building our own critiques, narratives, and practices by community college library workers of color. We'll pass it over to the editors, Eva and Amanda, in just one moment. First, I'm just going to say a couple of things about Library Juice. We are book publishers focusing on theoretical and practical issues in librarianship from a critical perspective for an audience of professional librarians and students of library science. We are an imprint of Litwin Books, so you can find more about us at litwinbooks.com. In addition to all the books that we publish, we also host a couple of journals, including the Journal of Critical Library and Information Studies, which focuses on research that critiques current and prevailing paradigms of LIS. And we recently started hosting the Journal of Critical Digital Librarianship, which examines critical approaches to the field of digital librarianship. So please do take a look at those journals, keep an eye on them to find out all the great things coming out. And of course, we would love to hear from you if you publish on those topics. There's more information about all of that on our website, as well as our social media platforms. You can find us on Blue Sky, on Mastodon, on Facebook, on Instagram, all the places you like to scroll. We're over there having a nice time. We have a sister organization, Library Juice Academy, which offers a range of online professional development courses for librarians and archivists and other staff in the library fields. We've got a couple of courses coming up that I think might be of particular interest to the crowd here today, but of course there's many more. But I just wanted to draw attention to just a handful, including becoming an inclusive and supportive supervisor, employee recruitment, retention and development, introduction to collection development, examining institutional racism in libraries, and inclusive instructional design. These courses are starting in April and in May, so do take a look. You can find more about all of this and all the other classes and certificates at libraryjuiceacademy.com. That's everything I wanted to say. I'm so happy at this time to pass it over to the editors of the new work. Eva and Amanda, it is all yours.
Thank you. My name is Amanda Marie Leftwich. I am one of the editors for the book, as been mentioned. I am moderating today as well, and I work at Montgomery County Community College. So welcome to everyone here. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to give contributors about 5 minutes each to speak. We have a short book or a small book, but we wanted to give our contributors a little bit of time. Q&A is also available. We have a Q&A box I thought I saw at the bottom. Any questions you have for us as well is available. Our book layout is in sections, right? So we have honoring our communities, honoring our stories, and honoring our labor. And each section follows sort of that format, right? So the communities focuses on communities of practice, our stories, more of our work and our how that work is influenced by being the only BIPOC in some of these spaces, and how our labor finally is influenced in section 3. The purpose of this book is really important because there are really no other texts that focus on BIPOC community college librarian voices. You may see 1 or 2 chapters in really important books throughout even this press, but not so much just focusing on our work, our labor, and what the differences are between what we do and how we serve in our communities, right? Most books focus on diversity of students, not the librarians and not the faculty or faculty librarians. And they really don't have the intention of showcasing how important our labor is, considering community colleges are very diverse spaces, right? In terms of age, of race, of who we are supporting. And if we don't have that support, what does that look like for our communities, right, that we're trying to help? So this book is the only book of its kind. So we really hope that you are reading through it or about to purchase it if you haven't purchased it already. But we're very excited to talk about the book. And I don't see Gerie here, but we're going to focus on chapter 1, and Gerie was first. So Gerie, if you are there, I'm going to stop my share for a second. No, that's all right. She'll be here in a bit. So that would be next up would be Evangelina Oates. Dr. Oates is going to talk about her chapter about communities of practice.
Right. Someone have the timer? I hope they do. I try to abide by the time that I'm given. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. I'm very excited to be able to talk about my chapter. I want to say before I forget that I really appreciate, I want to thank the editors for doing this book. It's really important that community colleges are represented in any conversations about academic libraries, giving the demographics that they serve and the number of students of color that are, in many cases, the predominant students on those campuses. So really appreciated the editors for the invitation, the call. And so far, I have loved reading the other chapters. I think I only maybe have 2 other chapters left, maybe 2 other chapters. My chapter came out of my really thinking about through my dissertation study and thinking about why were so few. My dissertation study was on Black librarians and their experiences in community colleges. And through looking at that and investigating what their experiences were, I kept wondering, with all the things that I was learning and my own experience at that time, having worked at a community college, is why aren't there more opportunities for us to work together? Why aren't we writing about our experiences? Now, I know why in some instances is that we're not necessarily incentivized to write. But I thought, even if we're not incentivized to write, we should still be finding ways as a community to be able to share what we're learning with us in service of our students and faculty, and also as support. So my chapter really looked at, one of the things I wanted to focus on was the prevalence of social or professional isolation within the profession of librarianship, and particularly how community colleges are stigmatized and marginalized in all these ways, and how that really affected my own experience as a director at a community college library. And the chapter focused on communities of practice because I really feel that we need to come together as a community to find ways to work, not just in service of our institutions, but in service of not our profession, but in service of ourselves, so that we find ways to amplify our work, that we can find good proponents and partners with this work, so that we are not taxed so heavily in our experiences. This book, I've also, of course, have recommended in general to my staff, but I'm also using my chapter as a way to also, as we start this new community of practice, to really think about how we are intentionally interacting with each other and what those community practices and what models might be of use to us. So I don't know if that was 5 minutes. I hope it isn't. So I'm going to stop there. But if there's time for questions and you have any, please let me know.
2 minutes to spare. Awesome as always. Thank you so much. And I love your chapter. It's great. All the chapters are great. And you really started us off with a conversation of communities of practice. So thank you so much. So next up is my chapter, actually, with Fran and Adriene. So if you two could come on, that would be lovely. And I'm going to share my screen again. So our chapter was about unique communities of practice and how they could be formed through partnerships with faculty or administrators, right? So we really wanted to talk about why communities of practice were important, not only because it helps you create community, right? As it says. But it's really good to know what other people are doing in other departments. I'm not sure about you, but where we work, which is Montgomery County Community College, sometimes we have a habit of being a little bit siloed, right? We don't know what's going on in this department. We're not sure what's going on in that department, but we're all doing amazing work. And really, the libraries can be there to support the work that we're doing, right? And really support our faculty and staff, realize that the work that they are doing is just as important as the work that the students are doing. So our chapter is really about that. And we wanted to make sure that people understand that COPs are a good use to form collaborations, to work with individuals that you may have never worked with before. So Fran, I think you're up next.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. In terms of using the interview, the narrative interview, it gave us an opportunity to really tell a story that each one of us, even though our differing positions within the college, we are sharing some of the same kind of problems. We're in an environment where it's often difficult to reach out to each other. But in terms of having this set up as an interview, it allowed each one of us to provide some insight into what our personal experiences are, and at the same time, show how it impacts the college on a small scale as well as on a much larger scale. It gave us an opportunity to have this sort of open-ended conversation in many respects that I think gives me as a faculty member a better understanding of what it means to be an administrator, and also the administrators to understand what it means in terms of the various conflicts and difficulties that I experience as a faculty. It's telling a story, and it's a story that otherwise would never be told. And I think that using the narrative format is probably the most effective means in which to convey each one of our individual concerns that are actually much more a collective issue. So that's why we use the interview process.
And lastly, Adriene, any recommendations?
Yeah, so, as a part of the research process, we talked a lot about what a community practice is, what it could look like, how it's formed. And we thought it was really important to leave the readers with a few recommendations for setting up a community of practice based off of what we had experienced in the community of practice that we created. And so in the chapter, we list 10 questions that we think everyone should ask if they're interested in forming a community of practice, whether it's structured or it's happening organically. And some of those questions really get you to thinking about how can we be intentional? How can we leverage a commitment that we all have to a particular practice that we all have expertise in? And how will we embrace flexibility and change? And then really just leveraging the opportunity and the resources that you have at your disposal. And it's really important, as Amanda said, sometimes we operate in a silo. So being open and thinking outside of the box. So you have to read the chapter to see all of the recommendations, but there are some really good ones in there and some questions to get you thinking about, what could our community of practice look like?
Perfect. Thank you. And we're going to go to section 2, and that is honoring our stories, frameworks, identities, and narratives. And the first person up is Sally, and I'm just going to stay organizing in the background. So Sally, whenever you're ready.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sally Najera Romero, and my chapter is Accepting My Own Worth, Reflections of Imposter Experience as a Latina Librarian in Academia. And so I wanted to start off by kind of also echoing why writing this piece was really important to me as a reflection piece. I was able to contribute to the literature, the limited literature on librarians of color and their experiences. And so this piece was reflective healing. And so Michelle Reel makes a quote on the next slide about reflective practices aim to integrate the scattered parts of ourselves that can contribute to our personal potential and at the same time stifle our potential to help others. And it shows us to ourselves, reveals and brings to light those aspects of our professional lives that are best dealt with once they have been articulated. And so I really felt that was the whole purpose of this piece, is to reflect and heal through the process of my first experiences like as a community college librarian of color. And so this piece really goes into counter storytelling. It pushes against the white-centered norms, and it really challenges that dominant narrative and ideologies. So I'm going to kind of take you through my chapter. And it starts off by focusing on my Latina culture, which is where our working people, talking about the research behind this almost hustle culture, this culturally instilled like being a servant to your work, and how that starts off at the beginning of your life, like how your parents were raised or how my parents were raised and then their parents were raised. And so just this always working kind of feeling. And as I moved into community colleges, I talked in this chapter about Latina as a fraction of the profession, especially in the community colleges that I've served, which were in California. A large Hispanic population, but a very limited amount of Latina librarian representation. My chapter also moves into the hidden motherhood and librarianship. It's no secret that motherhood in any aspect of any career industry is stigmatized. There's microaggressions, and LIS fields are no different. And so it goes into the research of this experience of microaggression within LIS and how I kind of experienced that. And because of that, I hid a lot of my motherhood in my early years of my career. And so then I'm starting to recognize like what is imposter experience, and really that piece kind of goes into its origin, how it came to be, how it was coined by two clinical research, Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing her name right, and just really understanding how all of that was coined. And I'm using imposter experience because they described it as an imposter phenomenon. It did end up kind of going into a syndrome. It doesn't. Clance has claimed that if she would do it all over again, she would never say syndrome because it isn't that. And so just really understanding like the origin of that. But then digging deeper on imposter experience in libraries and how research has shown, and studies have been conducted in LIS, but I started seeing that it was centered around whiteness. There has been little imposter experience research on people of color. And so then I started to put pieces together and realizing that I and other scholars have theorized that it's internalized racism for people of color. And that just that ability to not feel like you're belonging really intersects with your identities. And so imposter experience, at least research has shown that imposter experience is very intertwined with internalized racism. And so that's what that piece works out. And so after dealing with all of that, again, this whole piece is about healing. It's about being a librarian of color in community colleges. It's really accepting and owning my worth, and how I moved from, and this is later in life, this wasn't at the beginning, this is like now, 10 years later, understanding that I am in the position that I am, not because of this, phenomenon of, oh, I just got lucky, but because of the process that I've been in, and ruling out imposter experience as something that just happened to me that I have to fix, but really making it an institutional structure issue, that they're doing it to us. They're doing it to people of color. So it's not something we have to fix for ourselves. And so at the end, moving forward, I give suggestions of how I've kind of gone through this process, building communities of color, and really supporting me. Collegial support has been super helpful in realizing and reflecting through this healing process. So thank you, everyone, for giving me this time to talk about my piece.
Thank you. And next up, we have Andrew.
Hi. Well, I first got interested in this because of where I work. I work at Contra Costa College, and we're a HSI serving college, and low income college as well. That's what got me interested first. But then when I was writing the introduction, I was thinking about my own experiences as an immigrant. I came here to the States from Taiwan when I was 8, and kind of it just jogged my memory. And so, the chapter became a lot more meaningful. I I had to go through the editing process. And in retrospect, I was very thankful because I had a lot of readings that kind of put a framework to the things I've thought about with, working with my students here for over 10 years. Things like we all heard about microaggressions, but also I read up on stereotype threat from Pierce, and how that no matter what the stereotype is, it's bad, it's good, it's always putting extra pressure on our students either way, and we got to keep that in mind, even if we haven't had the experience of struggling in a particular way, we have struggled in some way, right? So I think it's always good to keep in mind when dealing with our students and supporting our students. And then went through Stigma, which is by Irving Goffman. And that was really important because the stigma isn't just, BIPOC students, is practically everyone, only well, I know the book is dated, but I think it's still relevant today. Wealthy, athletic, straight, white males that own a house or property, they are accepted, and then everyone else has some sort of label attached to them. Almost everyone else, right? The majority of people in the United States. So going from there, you get this parameter for thinking about how to support your students. And that's in library spaces, such as, my students, our study rooms are always full. So I'm thinking of ways to create more study spaces. And it's a big project, but, we're inching towards it. It's going to take a long time, but trying to create more of those spaces, taking away some of the desktop computers, putting in space for laptops, and then they can work together more easily. Maybe they're just plugging in their phones, but then they get to interact, work on whatever, or just talk. There's a lot of ways for BIPOC students to interact. And I think we have to facilitate that. We have chess sets here in the library. And last year, I was just watching them play. And one of the spectators asked me, do you want to be an advisor for the chess club? And I was like, sure, why not? So things like that, putting yourself out there, walking around the library, making interactions, learning names, asking about their classwork, and going from there. I read this section by Bell Hooks about, teaching to the whole student. And I totally agree with that. But you have to suss out every student, right? You don't just go in and start, what's your life experience like? Blah, blah, blah. So I would say, start easy and see how they take your interaction, take your support. Another thing was I read Tawana Hodge and how to be mutually respectful, of course. But the biggest thing I got out of that was self-reflective journaling. So at the end of the week or end of the day, you write a little bit to yourself in a journal, on pieces of paper, whatever that you can refer back to. And just to see, okay, what happened this week? What did I do with the students? How did I support them? And that's all I have time for. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Your chapter and Andrew's chapter is really the only one focusing on our role in supporting the students. So thank you so much. All right. And Doc is already here. So we are going to make sure we have your information up, right? Going too fast. There we go.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. I like to appreciate everyone on the call, especially the contributors, and also Amanda and Eva for great work done. My chapter was on student success and equity in the library, specifically looking at the collections in the library. And this chapter was actually born out of a commitment to ensure that academic libraries, especially community college libraries, provide or serve that inclusive and equitable space for our students. And this came when I started my role as equity and engagement librarian, but beyond that, I always had a passion of serving and being there for students of color, people like me. But intentionally, this chapter spoke expressly to looking intentionally at the collection development policies and looking at a collection as a whole. And it wasn't new to me when I started writing this chapter that the American Library Association since 1963 has been at the forefront of advocating for inclusive library collections. So it wasn't really like new, but then it was mind triggering that it's been as way far back as that, but it was still something that a couple of libraries and community college libraries weren't looking into or weren't even intentional about. I'm not going to say weren't aware of. So I started looking into bills of the Library Bill of Rights, which really speaks expressly to making sure that librarians and libraries do not exclude materials based on origin or viewpoint of their creators. And this again aligned very specifically with the community college libraries, which upholds a lot of principles around also serving underrepresented students. And it was more for me a call to action for me and other librarians to work intentionally to dismantling the barriers and to ensure that their collections reflect and also showcase the different experiences of the students that we serve. In one of the works that I did, in addition to while working on this chapter, I worked with other librarians to intentionally look at collection development policies. And some of the key things that I highlighted in the chapter was more about not just looking at a collection in the library, but also promoting student success and equity. And this could be and some of the ways could be by displaying books by BIPOC authors and also focusing on certain race and culture and also themes like social justice, and also making sure that the students have a say and a voice, and making sure that we not only having the display, also intentionally creating things like library guides and digital collections that will also enhance this diverse perspective. Some of the things that are highlighted in this chapter is also about engaging faculty and also students, like I mentioned earlier, and ensuring that we align with their needs. We have a lot of faculty and professors who a lot of times they embed different diverse perspective in their curriculum. It would be essential that we provide library resources and provide collections to help support this process. Now, the other thing that was highlighted in this chapter was collection assessment and collection development policy. One of the things that I kept asking myself when I was working on this chapter and the course of the work that I do was more about how many libraries, I'll speak specifically to community college libraries, how many of us have collection development policies, and let's take a step further to how many of us review our collection development policies. So developing a clear equity-driven collection development policy is essential, and conducting periodic reviews and ensuring that these diverse voices are represented is something that this chapter really highlights. And beyond just going through conducting the reviews, making sure that we use feedback, we get feedback from students and faculty to improve accessibility and inclusion. Though I kind of like wrapped up the chapter with providing recommendation. Funding is a thing, and something that is a little bit delicate to speak to, especially when we do not have a lot of funds, but it is important that we expand funding for diverse collections, prioritizing works by historically marginalized voices, especially in community colleges. I cannot say a lot about it, but we do have a lot of our represented. We have a marginalized, a disproportionately impacted students groups in community colleges. So it is important that we provide the funding to provide for diverse collections. The other key thing was more about providing the space for collaboration with faculty and community members to inform collection decisions. As we all know, in the past, we've had librarians just historically just people just sitting down and taking books and getting the books that they think or feel should be in the library. I think it's very important that we move from that space and get into a collaborative space of working with faculty and the students to make informed decisions for our collection development for collections in the library. And beyond this, I spoke earlier about promoting visibility of diverse materials, having display events. This month is Women's History Month, having a lot of celebrations around displaying books and resources, and having even digital outreach was another recommendation. And the final thing was more of advocating for policies that will protect intellectual freedom and resist censorship. So looking at the library collection was all some of the things that was discussed and highlighted in the book. I would also just end by providing that clear mission statement. And finally, I just see my time is up. I just want to pull up a call of action to other librarians in this space to intentionally look at their collection development systems and policies and work to promoting diverse voices in their collection. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamika.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. I'm trying to get my audio together. We had a bit of an issue this morning, but anyway. So hello, everyone. My name is Shamika J. Simpson. I'm a collection development outreach librarian at Long Beach City College, and I have a passion for visual storytelling, so bear with my storytelling today. Writing the chapter, Testament of Perseverance, a journey through tenure was a cathartic experience. It was just a way, it just released everything. There were so many things I was holding on to, and I didn't really realize it until I had the opportunity to write the book. Sorry, let me get into it. I'm a talker. So I'm not going to summarize my entire chapter today. My goal for you all today is just to give you a tidbit of kind of what I experienced going through the tenure probationary process. And I hope that you buy the book, share, and have meaningful book discussions based on what you hear from all of the co-authors today, all the authors today. So if you will, please take a seat at my digital table here and let me pour you some tea. And through a few images, I will share some of the details of my journey through tenure. So before we get started, I want you all to pause and think about these words and phrases: anti-Black racism, bias, unspoken expectations, weaponized and inequitable evaluations, single stories, systemic structure of fear, dysfunction, isolation, depression, trauma, healing, tenured. Now take a look at the first image on my wall here. This image shows a Black woman speaking to a group who we presume are colleagues. As she is speaking, these doubtful thoughts pop into her mind, from am I using slang, to do I come off too confident, to oh, they won't like that, to am I speaking too much with my hands, which I am guilty of. I always speak with my hands. I found this really great image on Instagram, so credit to Sarah A. and leanin.org, because this is me. So I too am overly cognizant of how I am perceived. Sometimes I wonder, am I not intelligent enough for academia? I see things differently. Sometimes I don't always agree with the group thought. However, for fear of, just being shut down, sometimes I just keep to myself. I don't really say too much anything. And a lot of that comes from during my probationary tenure process. Every move you make during this process is magnified, it's examined, it's compared to the status quo. You are unable to set your own bar. You're unable to be unique. And for me, a big part of coming to academia, I was like, okay, it's so great. I get to kind of marry the both worlds, right? My library, academic world, and then I also get to be uniquely me because, right, we support diversity and we support everyone being different. However, that isn't the case when you're faculty. In the next image, There's an image of, this is a green being. I don't want to call her an alien or him an alien. I'm just saying a green being from another planet, and it's ironing an outfit. The outfit is the skin of a white woman with perfect hair, makeup, stockings, and gloves. This outfit is the assumed perfect costume to fit in. Fit in. Good fit. Oppressive terms used to determine whether or not we are worthy of hire and worthy of tenure. To quote Paul Laurence Dunbar, we wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes, right? So the last image is from one of my favorite Christmas movies, Jingle Jangle. So young Journey is full of ideas and hope and confidence and innovation, love. She's tenacious. Her great soul reconnects a family that was pulled apart. She pulls her grandfather out of a cycle of doubt, depression, and fear and restores him. In the movie, Journey states that the square root of impossible is me. I don't know why that particular line resonates so much with me, but it does, because no one can write your story. Journey has a telescopic view. Instead of dwelling on her circumstances, she finds ways to soar. People absolutely can try whatever they want to destroy you, but they can't stop your God-given talents. I am still learning, but I am learning to ignore folks' perceptions of me and heal through being the best Shamika. I have to focus on being a greater me. That is just a tidbit. I just want to give you all just a taste of what my book was about, or my chapter was about. I'm sorry. So I hope you enjoyed my little visual representation and my story for today. Well, I'll wait for questions later.
Thank you, Shamika. That was great. Who do we have up next? We have our next section, and that's going to be honoring our laborers, reflection of our work. And first up is our series editor, and that's going to be Eva.
Hello, my name is Eva. Before I share a little bit about my chapter, I just want to show appreciation and thanks to all the contributors, peer reviewers, the press, and our editors, Rose and Annie. I want to give you all your due flowers. I want to thank you for your time and efforts. I also want to give Amanda a specific round of applause for having the foresight and for coming up with this idea of creating this text that brought us all together through time and space. So I just want to, if we could just do like a round of applause wherever you are, to all of you. So yeah, let me start with that, and let me kind of take you back to 2020, right? So a little bit prior to that is when Amanda and I began to talk about this, and I want to thank Amanda. When I say this, I mean the book, right? The idea of this book, the potential for this book, and that's around the time previous to the shutdowns and the pandemic, which was when we've had the conversations of this book taking place. So yeah, that's like about 5 years back, right? So when I bring that up, I want you to come to the present, from that to the present, and think about all of the things that transpired through that time that maybe took place in your lives, took place in my life. Many different things have happened since then. I lost my father. I had a child, literally going into tenure into 2020, right? So all of the things, and I'm not even including the losses of others or the happenings that happened, the beautiful reflections and pieces that we see in the text. So that kind of gives you an entry point into my chapter. So I was able to help co-edit this work, but I also have a chapter in the work as well, and it's called, let me see, Learning from the Brown Body, Chicana Feminism in the Community College Library. And so that's kind of like the the view of how I'm entering my chapter. I'm not gonna have time also to talk about my whole chapter, so I want folks to consider reading it and thinking about it. But my chapter really takes a look at, it's a reflective chapter. It really takes a look at education in this country. I felt like there were a lot of things that I wanted to do in this chapter. I think it was very like there was more I wanted to do, but this is what I kind of like landed on. And what it does is it's looking at education, and therefore by that libraries, because community college libraries are a part of the education infrastructure. And it's taking a look and kind of bringing up questions of what does that mean if we're in a space of settler colonialism? What does that mean for our students, our employees? How does that come into education, and therefore our work as librarians and the themes that we're talking about and thinking about in education? I start with myself. Because I believe it's important to bring in experiences like many of colleagues have talked about. So I look at the brown body, which is actually the body which is what a queer Chicana feminist educator brings it in her work. Her name is Cindy Cruz. And I thought like that was the best place for me to start when I was reflecting on this chapter, to start with my own experiences and what I was seeing in education, and specifically in the library. And so I go through I have different headings in my chapter, different things that I talk about, but I wanted to just read a section if possible, because I think this is what my chapter really embodies, and what I'm essentially saying that I would love to see in education and in libraries. So I'm going to start. I'm on page 164. Hopefully this method works in the online environment. I'm literally going to read the last couple of paragraphs. So here I say, too often we need to feel acknowledged by these organizations, peoples, and institutions who truly only care about status, accreditation, checking off all the boxes and reports to the state, and making enrollment. However, our most valuable constituents are students and community. Equity can only go so far. We need liberation. Students and our communities are the people we need to look to for validation and recommendations in our education work. I would much rather have the support and acknowledgement of my community than an award. Not all librarians or information workers will resonate with the messages in this chapter. However, information workers need to acknowledge that our identities and experiences have wisdoms that want to be part of the library work. Our communities need your reflections, resistance, and critical analysis. We all can use our experiences to improve and expand our discipline, workspaces, and education overall. I urge community colleges and college libraries to invite a conversation and incorporation of how women of color feminist practices in our work can make our community college spaces of learning truly liberational. It's time to change the way we do work in the community college. I start with my brown body. I start with libertad. And so I'm gonna end there. And I just wanna just say that when I looked and I got this book, I felt the energy. It was like this book was like a light of all of our energy. And so I wanna thank you for that. And I will end my time. Thank you.
Dele, you're up.
Okay. Hi, everyone. This was a very, should I say, a reflective chapter for me to write, because it traces back my onboarding process, going back all the way, to about 3 decades ago when I started working at as a librarian at a community college. At first, I wrote about my onboarding process, the first few years, and I stopped because it was very, a very happy period for me. Working with my colleagues back then, we were very supportive of each other. We were practicing inclusivity before it even became a very popular word. And then diversity, we recognized that. So we worked well together. We planned our conferences, workshops, everything together. We traveled together, even shared hotel rooms, So, and reflecting on that period, it was very, very important to me and to all of us during that time that we recognize or realize that onboarding continues, not just at hiring, and not also once we start working, if a year or two during your tenure review process, probationary process is over. No, it continued all through. We had our dean back then, our deans that we eventually had, that truly encouraged us to be ourselves, truly encouraged us to aspire to be more. I recognize our skills that actually talk to us, that made sure that when we got to work, the very first day that I got to my office, that everything was ready and prepared for me to start working. And also made the time to actually introduce us to the college community. And that meant at both campuses. So our deans were very supportive, even encouraged people like me to become the department head. I work at the same institution as Shamika, and I think going down from my new employee to seasoned employee to the later years, things started changing as we keep going. Things started changes, and due to changing leadership as well, we started. There was a lot of disconnect. Things were discontinued. The faculty, librarians are faculty here, some of us don't even, it's like we don't recognize each other's abilities or capability, don't even encourage each other. And also with the staff, at a point, most of us, it's like we don't even talk to each other at a point. And that's where my title of my chapter, actually came from. And now we're strangers. So when I became the department head, it was a big struggle for me, still a big challenge, for me, because essentially not having the support of the dean the way I should currently, when we do not have, our dean finds it very difficult to communicate with, I would say the Black librarian females, or the colored librarian, females that we are here. That created a lot of problems for us, a lot of challenges for us that we're still working through, trying to deal with. Or when we start dealing with hearsays about us, people just siding with a story, that they hear about us, which without verifying. I think that, that change kind of, was a big a revision to what I was used to from years ago, where everybody was working together and it wasn't as malicious and as toxic a work environment as it eventually became. But since becoming the department head, we've been working together, trying to, my first goal was to restore transparency as much as possible to the department. For us to start up, at least encouraging each other, for us to start working together as much as we can. I think that people are seeing now the benefits of that. My colleagues, we're seeing the benefits of that. We are trying to do a lot of things together. There are still a lot of challenges. With the new librarians that we're hired, or the new staff that we're hired, we are trying as much as possible to create an ongoing onboarding process for them, and to make sure that they, are welcome on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresita, you are last up.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm going to start my own timer so I have a sense of my own time. Good morning. My chapter is called Race Lighting, Understanding Experiences with Questioning Our Own Realities. My chapter is based on my experience in my first experience in the community college system. I had been a librarian at many other kinds of institutions. Actually, I've been a librarian at public libraries. Then I went into private university library. Then I went to a CSU library. And then I went to community college. And when I began my journey at the community college library, it was very jarring. It was very different. And I really had no idea why. And I mean, to this day, I don't know, is it community colleges? Is it, was it this community college? Was it why? What is it? I don't know. I don't really know. But I think a big part of my story and what I try to convey in this chapter is that it doesn't really matter why, really. It doesn't matter why people treat us the way they do, if it's because of my race or not. Is it because of my this identity, that identity, all these different things? It's not our burden to have to figure that out, right? That's not on me to figure out why you have a problem with me, it's the only thing we can control is our own response, right? So just, dealing with the interactions that we have, dealing with microaggressions and institutional racism and all of this, and kind of the effects. So I see I've got my next slide here. So this slide goes over the effects of race lighting. Race lighting is a phenomenon that was described by Doctors Wood and Harris. I refer to their article in the chapter. So if you want to find their article, it's cited in the chapter. But they go over more in depth exactly what race lighting is, and they are the ones who first coined that term race lighting. And basically what it is racial gaslighting. So, when as a result of our microaggression interactions or even that institutional response, based in racism, that the effects can be disorientation, confusion, questioning our own reality, the same sort of effects that gaslighting can have. I also talk about that, gaslighting and that phenomenon and how it makes people really just question their own reality, right? It's about creating that confusion. It's about creating that feeling like maybe I'm not what I thought I was. As I mentioned, I was in public libraries and that library and that kind of library. And when I came to the community college library, I felt like maybe I don't actually know how to be a librarian. Maybe I'm not actually a good librarian. I thought I had done good work. I thought I had, hey, I'm doing this and that and whatever, I'm doing these initiatives or whatever, coming to this library. And it was just a completely different environment. Because of the institution, because of the culture that they, the campus culture that they were promoting and continue to promote, and because of the interpersonal interactions going on with colleagues as well. That again, that's detailed more in the chapter. But and I see I only have 1 minute left. So really, I wanted to really highlight this slide too, and just kind of bring the word of race lighting to everyone. If you're experiencing these kinds of feelings, why am I not being effective? Or, why is it that people are making me feel like I really don't know what's going on? What is happening? And that's really what my experience was when I came to the community college system. What is happening here? And why is this culture functioning the way that it is, And it's not because you're not worthy to be there. It's not because you're not, a good librarian, or it's not because of, these sorts of things. It's because of that institutional racism. It's because of those microaggressions and those things that are just bombarding us every day, right? We have to walk around in our skins, in our identities, and have people reacting to us all the time. And that can really lead to a lot of a burden, mental burden. So the chapter goes through, if you're experiencing these sorts of things, there are steps that you can take to combat that race lighting effect. There are things that I did, and there are ways that I was able to work through it. So that I was able to remain in my position. I'm still there now. I'm still at the institution now, and that's not to say because they changed or anything, but just because I was able to combat it, in my own interpersonal and in my own kind of story. So yeah, I encourage everybody to read the chapter, read all of these chapters. Everybody's chapters just sound just amazing, and I'm just glad to be a part of this group. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Your chapter is amazing. So if everybody wants to have their cameras back on while we are ready for question and answering, if that's okay. We went a little over, so I apologize if you have another meeting right after this. I was trying to make it so that we have a full 10 minutes, but c'est la vie. So if you have any questions for us, please let us know. We're happy to answer anything that you may have. And I see there's some questions in the Q&A. If there's any more, please let us know. Oh, someone said, can I add my applause reaction here? We'll do it for you. Thank you very much. Okay. And then the next question, this is a good one. It says, in my space, it has been challenging to collaborate in other areas of campus, particularly because the library is typically valued when our physical spaces are needed or when equipment needs to be barcoded and circulated in other departments. What advice can be shared about engaging in collaboration that truly values the library instead of being one-sided benefit for other departments? Are there any examples of collaborative efforts? And Evangelina, would you mind sharing what you typed?
Oh yeah. I'm at a very large, decentralized university now. And it's amazing. I'll just say neoliberalism at its finest describes the structure, the budgeting structure. Everything is competitive. Budgeting structure doesn't really allow for a lot of interdisciplinary or doesn't really encourage collaboration. And so we have some partnerships now. Is everybody that's in this room visible? Because I'm talking about partnerships. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how candid I could be. I'll put it this way. I just had a conversation this morning about this particular thing, right? And looking at physical space is always that thing, right? Real estate on campus. And it's even more so when you have a budgeting model that charges you based on physical space. So one of the things that we're talking about is looking at parameters. One of the things that was done before me and the other two AULs that started around the same time was really looking at, looking at criteria for partnerships. And one of the criteria named looking at their past, their track record, right? Or trying to find out the track record of have these folks been good partners with other people? So right now we're even thinking about, do we need to develop a rubric, right? So have some things prioritized about what do we need to do? Do these things align with our own values and purpose or programmatic goals? And so we're dealing with this now. And so thank you for that question. I love to see that it's happening at community colleges of all sizes, and it's happening at large research universities too. So I think it's parameters, and if your goals don't align and there's nothing in it for the library, then it's a no-go.
Anyone else want to share? We all talked about collaboration in some sort in our chapters.
I went at it a little differently. Like if the library has plans, has things it wants to accomplish, then you go out and you do your outreach, right? So it will be positive for yourself instead of reactive. For us, we've been trying to grow our embedded librarian collaboration with different departments over years. And it's really taking off now, but it took years, and it's good for both sides. As far as the space goes, we just put a limit on it. Each section can have like 4 uses of the library classroom. So they're not in there every single week. And, we want that for our space and our students. But yeah, it's just, it's a give and take. Sometimes we'll do things for departments and, not think about it. But sometimes they'll tell us, hey, we have a grant for whatever, OER or something. And then we get their books and we get to check them out and we keep the stats, right? So all those things.
That's great. Adima, I think your hand was raised.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. Yes, I was just going to speak a little bit to Andrew's point about outreach and going out to them, and especially with the perceived perception of the library, and we need to go out to them. I am the equity and engagement librarian. I do a lot of outreach on campus, going out to faculty, asking for those class visits. The initial time, the 5 minutes class visits has turned to 30 minutes, and now it's becoming library request sessions. We had an event last spring that is coming again this spring, pop-up library in the quad. We have a beautiful quad. We had music and food, and we took out the services to the quad. And the embedded session is also going well. Like to Andrew's point, it started out slow, and being in, I'll just say not all librarians are the same, but just also being in their spaces and curating, not telling them, curating resources for them. And hey, the library has this, because sometimes they do not know the value that we bring and we have until we give it to them, and then they're not asking for more. So collaboration is, for the first few times, we have to go out to them, and also partnering during events, Women's History Month, creating those guides and doing sessions, and even talking to the students to have voices for us is another thing that could be very helpful. I could share more ideas offline. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else before we get to our next question? Oh, we have one. This is a good one. As an adjunct where many of the library structures have been white femme tenured librarians, BIPOC folks tend to be adjunct librarians. I've seen some of your same observations, and some of you have noted in your chapter discussions, especially for those of you who have mentioned tenure and navigating the system. Do you have any tips for finding community and support, or any mentors anywhere on campus? Deli, I think that one's right towards you.
Yeah, we do a lot of, I know for the full-time, let me start with full-time faculty. We across campus, we had a wonderful professional development coordinator. And with her, she reestablished the mentorship, mentoring incoming, the new faculty, full-time faculty coming in into the college. Now, for the departments, I don't know how other departments handle theirs, but and again, for the library, I try as much as possible to not only be the mentor, but also to see where their interests align, so that other librarians can also mentor them. Not just full-time librarians, but also part-time librarians, pairing them or partnering them with part-time librarians, so that they can be properly onboarded, properly mentored, as they grow in the profession. And for many years, there is that, that relationship stays. But also you have to be very careful so that with partnering people, because you don't want there to be this illusion of, that person becomes the sole person to look to for guidance. You have to make sure that they understand that they can look up to us, any one of us, for guidance, depending on what what they want, or what they're seeking, or what their needs are.
Yeah, Eva, go ahead.
Thanks, Dele. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to approach this, depending specifically like what somebody could be looking for in mentoring or support. I feel like for myself, it hasn't always been in my department where I've got some of the strongest mentoring, and I think that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to just be in the library department. I think some of the strongest mentoring that I've gotten has been with faculty, collaborations. And also, believe it or not, your students, the students definitely, like, not to say that you're gonna like bomb them with like all your problems, but believe it or not, like student clubs or spaces where like students are organizing are some of the most powerful places to go for community and community building. So I think there are many ways to approach this. The quote unquote professional way I know is a top down approach, but don't be afraid to be bottom down or horizontal, you know? So those are my thoughts on that, but so many ways to approach this. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, I think I'll add, I feel like most of my mentorship came outside of the libraries. I'm the only person of color. I started there as a faculty diversity fellow or a library resident for those who are like, what is a diversity fellow? Since that's more of an internal term. So I had no mentorship whatsoever. So people like Fran, Stephanie, who's also in our chapter, Evangelina, were really people who supported me and like were like, go do your doctoral program and you should be thinking about this and you should be writing and you should be presenting and all these great things. So don't be afraid to work with, especially if you have a liaison group, to work with your liaison folks. Those are probably going to be the people that you're going to present with, you're going to write with, you're going to learn from, and you will also be working with their students probably one-on-one for those embedded classes like people are saying. So don't be afraid to get outside the library because that's probably where your best collaboration is going to come from. I don't see any other Q&A questions, and I don't want to keep you too much longer before you're like, Amanda, you said this was an hour. So thank you so much for your attendance and attention. Please, Sophie, thank you so much. She put a link to buy the book there. Please buy the book. Please buy books within our series as well, the Race and Multiculturalism series. There are wonderful books, and there's more coming in the next couple of months. So we're so excited that you can be here. Please purchase the book or purchase a book for your library. Thank you so much for your time, contributors. You are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.